Hey, everybody, and welcome on into our special International Women's Day edition here. We love doing these Facebook panels on women in sport, but today obviously being a very special day. Andi Petrillo with you, and I'll be joined by four incredible guests. If you've joined me here before, you know how it works. I have two of them for half an hour, and then we get another two great guests that join us at the second half of this hour. So right out of the gates, I do have Cynthia Appia with me, bobsledder, now a pilot in bobsled as well. You had an incredible year. Congratulations on that, top 10 at the World Championships, ninth, in fact, highest for a Canadian woman, and also monobob. And you were fifth in that. We'll get into that in just a moment because that will be making an Olympic debut, talking about the progression of adding more women's sports to the Olympic resume. And Adam Van Koeverden, I call you a dear friend. I've known you for many, many years. You are a member of parliament now for Milton, but you are an Olympic and world champion in kayak, another sport that's making strides when it comes to the participation of women at the Olympics. So welcome. I'm so happy to have the two of you kick things off with me today here on International Women's Day. And Cynthia, I do want to begin with you. It's a very easy question. How has sport impacted your life?
I mean, I'm an athlete, right? So it's impacted my life greatly. To even be able to make a career at a sport is like something that very few people can say. And it's opened so many doors for me. I've been able to travel across Canada, which I don't think a lot of people have that opportunity to. And to be able to now travel across the world is such a luxury that not many people can afford to do. And there's just so many experiences that you get from sport, life experiences that once everything's said and done, you then carry on into what I like to call the real world. Yeah, sport has just brought me so many things, opened so many doors and opportunities for me that I don't know where I would be without sport.
Adam, same with you. I mean, how has sport impacted your life? How have you also, again, in honor of International Women's Day, how have you also seen it impact those of women around you competing in sport?
That's a great question, Andi, and it's nice to be here with you as well. Like you said, I've had the opportunity to work with so many amazing women broadcasters in the sport field, and certainly count you among them when we were able to go to Sochi and Pyeongchang together. But sports had an incalculable impact on my life. I was raised by a single mom in community housing, and when I think back to the impact that it had on both of our lives, my brother and her specifically, it gave my mom options. It gave my mom space. It created an opportunity for my mom to do her work and to continue to pursue her own goals and dreams while still being a really awesome mom. Down at the canoe club, I also had an incredible number of female role models in the sport of canoe kayak. Kind of ironically, I suppose, my mom brought me down to the canoe club. My dad was always an amazing dad, and in the picture, I was very fortunate for that. But my mom wanted me to have more male sport role models in my life. I wasn't good at like hockey and soccer and basketball, so she was looking for something for me to do, and my brother as well. But when I got down there, I found more female role models than I think she might have anticipated in people like Carolyn Brunet and my training group at the time, because I was starting a little bit late. I trained with the women and girls for the first couple of years of my career. And like you said, you mentioned it, canoe kayak is going through a bit of a renaissance period now, growing up as a sport, I should say. In Tokyo, it'll be the first time that women will be competing in canoe. Women have always competed in kayak, which was my discipline. But in the discipline that you've seen Mark Oldershaw and Tom Hall and Steve Giles compete in, it'll be the first time that women get to compete alongside men in the same categories.
We'll have the Olympic conversation in just a moment, but I also want to go to the flip side. And that is, what has sport done to frustrate you? Cynthia, if you were to look at moments in life as well, where you're just like, and I'm not talking about losing. I mean, obviously, if you're an athlete and you're competing, obviously that'll always frustrate you. Bigger picture frustration from the world of sport.
Just speaking as an athlete and obviously as a spectator, there are some points in sport where, I feel like women's sport in general doesn't get the, the acclamation or the pomp and circumstance that I think it deserves. Internally within the bobsleigh side of things, it is frustrating. We've been lobbying for a second event for such a long time, and now it's manifested in the form of monobob, but we'd actually tried to petition for women. And we were super close to getting that. And, decisions were made, and monoball was included instead. And so there are times where it does get frustrating because you do want that equity in sport. And sometimes it's not afforded to you because of decisions that are completely out of your control. We're still going to try and push forward for 4 women in the future. It's not a fight that's over with, but there are some frustrating parts in sport, and I feel like those two are the more critical side of it for me.
Can you share why? I'm just curious why the decision not to have 4 women in a sled.
There's been a lot of reasons. Some of it is logistically, whether it's feasible, financially, whether it's feasible. Then I can sometimes be a cynic, and I think it's just simply an old boys club, and they don't think women are capable of doing it, whether it's safe enough, even though women have demonstrated for years that they're capable of doing for women. And I think there is an internalized fear that is brought on by members of this old boys club, and some of the female pilots internalize it as, if they don't believe that I can do it, then I can't do it either. But the tide did slowly change towards Pyeongchang, where there were more and more women slowly considering it, especially as 4 women was put up as a potential event for Beijing. But now that it's kind of been off the table for a bit, I think you do see a little bit of that side coming back again of like whether women are capable of competing in a 4-woman event.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll keep our eye on that story, because we've heard it before. If it's not safe for women, or this is going to be bad on a woman's body, and it's like, thanks, I think I know how my body works. I think I can take care of myself.
Exactly.
But Adam, where was the frustration for you in sport?
Well, I'll be honest, it continues, and it has the same root cause as Cynthia mentioned, and it's with respect to equity and with respect to the speed at which we can achieve those things. It's always just been too slow. I started trying to compete for Canada in around 1999, and at that time there were amazing women paddling canoes around the world saying we want to race at the Olympics, and it took 20 years. It took more than 20 years, quite frankly, but for the first time, athletes will be competing in women's canoe in Tokyo, which is great progress. But again, other sort of benchmarks still exist, right? The government of Canada, where I work currently, we've set a target of achieving gender equality in sport at every level by 2035. Like, that's 14 years away. We've got a lot of work to do. But like Cynthia, I like going fast, and I'm not satisfied with the speed of government. So a lot of these, I'm not criticizing my own government. I'm saying, like, the reality is things take too long. So I just want to speed them up and keep pushing and keep fighting the good fight. We've got to do everything we can. I mean, there's health implications, right? It's not just for enjoyment and for fun and for clapping and everything. But there's some really, really good, robust research from organizations like Participation and Canadian Women in Sport that are indicating that women are dropping out of sport at alarmingly high rates. And that leaves women more susceptible and vulnerable to lifestyle related diseases later in life if they haven't developed the physical literacy necessary to continue. And that's a personal issue for me as somebody that found sport maybe a little bit later than a lot of boys did. But my mom recognized the importance of her boys being active and finding their place in sport, despite quite frankly, not being very good at a lot of those early adoption sports, those early indicator sports, where young boys are identified as, oh, he's going to go in the NHL and he's going to go in the NBA. I wasn't that kid. But sport is something that can build nations. It does improve health. Sport does create community. It aids in social development, and it's about far more than just clapping along and watching role models. It really is a precursor to better health outcomes for Canadians. So that's why I demand that this equality framework, we continue to push forward and set really, really aggressive targets.
I know you've been an advocate for years, and it's also a breath of fresh air to hear that. But at the same time, it's I think it's there's truth, but it can also be a lazy narrative that it's just men, who hold women back, because there's so many men who support women. There's so many men who push, and there's so many men who have a voice as well. So what is it that creates this slow process? I mean, is it the institution? Is it the decision makers up top? I mean, how does that change? Because I know there are a lot of men as well, quote unquote, in the trenches, the athletes themselves, who say we need change. We recognize there needs to be change. And then yet even that's slow. Right? Like, I just don't know. We always like to point a finger. Who are we finger pointing? Or maybe we're not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's not that simple.
I think it's it's a multifaceted issue. I think, like you said, there are men that are pushing forth for equity across the board, and I can say to my team, like my coaches have been really vocal about pushing for women as an event, as an example for me. But I think it's just there's so many different roadblocks that you come across that even if you tackle one problem, there are like 5 more that you have to tackle, plus another 2 that show up out of nowhere. So I think it's like any movement or any issue, you kind of need to put pressure on all fronts before things start to budge. And unfortunately, like Adam said, things do take a long time. And it's because it's a multifaceted issue. It's not one thing that you got to tackle and then that's the problem and everything's okay. Things take too long because so many other issues come into play.
Is that how you see it, Adam?
Yeah, no, I definitely tend to agree with Cynthia. The reality is that gender equity is not just a women's issue. It's an issue for men and people of all genders to tackle at the same time. We all have our preoccupations. We all have our biases as well. We all have to work through those and, become more mindful of some of those biases that are holding people back. But we also have to recognize the power that sport and physical activity and recreation hold. And it's so phenomenal. The utility of physical activity in society to break those barriers down. And, we don't need to look any further than the role models that we have in Canadian sport leadership, in Canadian sport participation, in our athletes, and in our broadcasting to demonstrate just that. The reality is all Canadians should have the opportunity to participate in sport and physical activity and recreation at all levels equally. And I think maybe the reason that it'll take time to get it right is important things do take time. I'm not being an apologist for the rate of government, but when things are a complex issue with many root causes, as Cynthia said, multifaceted, they will take time, and it requires research and implementation and discovery. And this is not a straightforward path towards equity, but it's a destination for sure. And the concept of equity and equality of access and universal access is one that it extends beyond just gender as well. I think it's important to recognize there's other barriers between sport and physical activity and people in Canadian society. But today, of course, on International Women's Day, we're focused on looking at it through a gender lens. And it is just like gender-based violence and violence in sport and all of these types of issues. It's a men's issue as well, and we need to focus on solutions regardless of your position in the game.
Well, let's speak to, also diversity, and Cynthia, I'll come back to you on this one, and just maybe the importance and the implications of having more women get into manager roles, coaching roles, as opposed to, just being the athlete, but also even you as an athlete, knowing that maybe when the day comes when you retire, you can get into coaching. Like, how important is it to know that there is a pathway to that?
It's super important because diversity brings so many ideas and viewpoints that sometimes get lost when you have, one group set or just running the show. And not to say that, men aren't, are doing a bad job, but I mean, diversity, men, women, different people from different backgrounds, people of color, it brings so many different viewpoints that it ultimately will just make things better. Our team just hired our first female coach in about 7 or 8 years. And it's been a good transition because, again, I love my coaches. They've been really good, but it's nice to have a female coach who can bring a different perspective of things to our male coaches that sometimes they just inherently don't know because they are men. There are some things that female athletes go through that, again, male coaches, male athletes don't have a clue about, just simply because they've never lived that experience. And so having her on board has brought that different point of view of like, hey, this is why, this is why this is going this way, or why this person is acting this way, or whatever it may be. Again, diversity just brings, it just makes things easier, makes things better, makes people understand each other better. There's not that conflict because people are assuming things without actually knowing what it is. So, I mean, I'm all for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, like Adam, when you think of your experiences, maybe, with male coaches, like just how important that was to you, right? And then other people being able to have access to those types of close relationships, right? If they're being represented in a manager or coach role or trainer role.
there's all sorts of good research to indicate that having women in positions of authority and leadership, but also in coaching, leads to better decision making in sport, but also in the corporate world. So, that diversity is so important. Diversity is often referred to as a fact, whereas inclusion is the act, which is actually actively pursuing diversity and ensuring that the diversity is representative. But that it's also, not just an invitation to the table, but an opportunity to work and to be really, really relevant and functional in that role. And it's so important that people in those influential positions are available to challenge all the stereotypes and stand up against these biases that still continue to exist in leadership roles. For sure, in coaching, I benefited from male and female coaching throughout my career, and can say that they, brought different perspectives. Not every male coach is the same as every male coach, and that diversity is, I think, really, really important. But when we look at the root cause of the dropout rate for women and girls from sport, the lack of female mentorship opportunities and people to look up to, and imagining yourself in a position like that, or imagining yourself on a podium one day, or on a team on one day, or traveling to do this as a career, that opportunity to dream is still limited for a lot of women and girls. And I think it's everybody's responsibility that works in the world of sport participation, physical activity, and recreation to address that, to challenge it.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you bring up, also the point we can talk about it, but then there's that whole inclusion and that whole implementation. And I say it's wonderful. And I love International Women's Day. And obviously it's a day that's needed. It's a day that should be celebrated. But I also say that this is a day where it can be used as a stepping stone, or it can be used as a token day. One of those, will lead to progression. One leads to stagnation, because it can't just be today where you say, look, women can do this. Isn't that great? And then you don't have them be a part or do that job until the other International Women's Day comes around a year later, right? It's about including implementation. Let's go. It's about progression and the evolution of things. But let's have a bit of an Olympic conversation, because the Beijing 2022 Games will be the closest to a 50-50 split in participation between men and women. We've seen over the last few years more mixed events getting added. And we're also definitely seeing more women's events getting added. And Cynthia, that's where we can, get into monobob. That will make its Olympic debut in Beijing. What do you also make of more women's sports just being added to this Olympic resume, and, bringing that participation as close to 50-50 as possible?
It has a huge impact. I mean, as Adam mentioned before, that statistic of that dropout rate for women and girls is really high. And I think it's because, for the most part, there's not a lot of focus on sports as a whole, but in particular, there's almost, we kind of need to break down that stereotype of what's a male sport and what's a women's sport. I think all sports is open for everyone, like whether you're male or female, you can do any sport. And so having that as close to equality in sport at the Olympic level as you can will open up the doors for girls who may not realize that there's a sport out there for them. They might see the traditional sports that are kind of paraded on TV day in and day out and be like, none of these things really resonate with me, until they see something that they go, that kind of piques my interest. And it's that representation that I'm hopeful it will come out of having Olympic equity, I guess you can say. Having an equal number of sports, or equal number of women participating in sports, will, hopefully pique the next generation's interest as to what they can do, and that they don't have to be pigeonholed in the traditional, hockey or soccer or basketball. There are so many sports that, as a nation, we excel in, and it doesn't get the proper attention. And obviously the Olympic platform is the best way to do that. Every 4 years we get that, tunnel vision focus on an event, and, hopefully that carries through into the next generation, and they see the possibilities are endless.
Hey, last weekend, even I'm still learning. Like, for the first time ever at the World Championships, the Nordic World Championships, women competed in the large hill. and ski jumping. And it's like, hopefully we expose that sport maybe to some people that, some young girls go, hey, maybe that's a sport I want to do. But how about as well on your side, Adam? We had already mentioned it, that for the first time we're going to see women compete in the canoe sprints and in slalom. It's something they've been lobbying for quite some time. So that will make its debut in Tokyo. Why is that so important to the progression of this sport?
Well, I think you touched on something really important early on in your question, which is with respect to the maybe tokenization of International Women's Day, and that it's just a day. And if it's not utilized effectively, then, what are we trying to achieve? And I think it's quite relevant that we're just into the second week of March following Black History Month. And, oftentimes it's like, okay, well, what next? Because we just had this conversation for a month. So, let's not forget about it for the next 11 months. Mm-hmm. And I think the same is relevant and true of International Women's Day, because tomorrow won't be International Women's Day. It will be the day after, and it'll actually be the day where there's the most days until another International Women's Day. So it's incumbent upon all of us to say, what next, right after these. So after these milestone achievements, like gender equity in canoe kayak, for example, or closer to gender equity in bobsleigh, what next? And I think the what next for me as a federal legislator and as parliamentary secretary for sport in Canada is now we've got to broaden the opportunity spectrum, that bottom of the pyramid, to make sure that more women and girls feel safe in sport, make sure that they feel at home in sport, make sure there's opportunity so that there's more Cynthias out there dreaming as young girls at some point in their lives and imagining themselves in that position of achievement or authority or representation, whatever it might be. And, putting to action these important days and these important conversations that happen as a result of these days, but really trying to go, okay, next step. And then next step, from my position at least, is to make sure that that opportunity exists, that the enrollment and the participation levels are reflective of that, that instead of, I think the number was 9 out of 10 girls dropping out of sport in the first couple of years, let's cut that in half. Let's set a really achievable goal. I work for a government, so it's going to take too long. But setting those ambitions, and being really optimistic, but aggressive at the same time. I think we can be. Canada is a place that's always fostered opportunity and change in a positive direction. So I think we can continue to be leaders in that way if we're all willing to work together.
I'll save the politician jokes for after, Adam. I'll bug you about that later. But I want to come back to you about participation. I do want to come back to you just quickly about participation, because one of the conversations we're having in our current climate of COVID and the pandemic are, there seems to maybe be, and maybe you can correct me on this or confirm or give your opinion on it, that there is an attention to definitely boys sports coming back, men's sports coming back, and that women fear that they're going to be left behind, all this progression that they made. And suddenly it's like, okay, we have to wait your turn. Government approval works this way. Have you been hearing those types of conversations, and just what are your thoughts on that?
I haven't been a party to any of those conversations, but I do recall back to, the junior men's hockey happening, with great expediency and urgency, but the women's junior hockey tournament not occurring because it maybe didn't have the same financial impetus behind it. So I think that's a very relevant question. From my perspective, we're going to be talking about a feminist recovery. We're going to be talking about an inclusive recovery that works for everybody. If we talk about building back better, then I'm always trying to, put my hand up in the room and say, what does this look like for people in sport, for people that that currently aren't involved in physical activity and recreation? And specifically, we're going to talk about it from a feminist perspective. And I think we ought to, because what's very, very clear is this pandemic has had a far greater and disproportionate impact on women and girls, particularly women and girls in Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities in Canada. And that extends to how available sport, physical activity, and recreation is, for reasons that you identified, but many others as well. Women have taken on roles of responsibility, a greater responsibility throughout this pandemic. And I think access for those kids to get into physical activity will create that opportunity of reprieve. Like I mentioned with respect to my mother at the beginning of this conversation, going down to the canoe club was more than just learning how to kayak for me and my brother. It was an opportunity for my mom just to chill out and to not have 2 teenage boys in her face. And I think parents across the country, and particularly mothers, need that too. So since September, I convened a working group to focus on sport, physical activity, and recreation in Canada and an active recovery from COVID-19. And that's been one of my main focuses in the last couple of months.
Oh, I think we'll get Cynthia back in just a moment, because I I can't believe we only have 5 minutes left with the two of you before we switch to the other two great guests who are going to join us. So I'll come back to you, Adam, and when we get Cynthia back, because I do want to leave you with this. Like, if there's one thing that you would like to challenge when it comes to inequity in sport, what would that be? And then, of course, on the flip side, I always love my yin and yang. What's one thing that gives you hope about the progression of women's sports?
The most troubling statistic for me is the dropout rate for women and girls, and I had it up on my screen here, like all of us constantly double screening, but the challenge is that the rate of dropout is so much higher for girls and women in sport, and I want to challenge that. I want to cut it in half. I think it's really, really important that we identify the root causes of these dropouts, and figure out why sport isn't appealing or available or fun or welcoming or safe for women and girls. And getting to the root causes of that source of inequity and that imbalance is the first step, I think. What gives me hope is that the research exists, that we already have the amazing leadership from Canadian Women in Sport and many other organizations like the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. Organizations like Coaches of Canada and the Coaching Association of Canada are run by women. Own the Podium's run by a woman. So there is hope, and there is an indication that, you know, sport in Canada has always had strong female leadership, but that's no reason to take our foot off the gas pedal just yet. But like I said, if we can challenge that dropout rate, I think it'll lead to better social outcomes for women and girls in Canada. Cynthia, can you hear us?
I can. I really apologize for that. The Wi-Fi kicked out in the whole building.
I was saying, you are everybody on Zoom. Like, we've all had that experience. We've all, you know, our internet's either gone or something's happened technically. I think the last panel I did, someone was ringing my doorbell, and my dog felt very felt that it was necessary. How fast did Cynthia get back here? She was back, and you basically didn't even have time to push a bobsled the first 100 days. You were back quickly, but I think everyone, it humanizes the fact that, oh yeah, this is still Zoom, and something will go wrong inevitably, but we get right back on track. Exactly. And I said, I can't believe that already 30 minutes has gone by. So I'll end off by asking you the same question that I just asked Adam. So the two sides to this coin, right? What's the one thing when it comes to inequity in sport that you would like to challenge? And then what's also something that gives you hope for women in sport moving forward?
The one thing I would like to challenge is and we've alluded to this in the conversation, is just having more women in admin roles, coaching roles, and really increasing that diversity aspect, just so we can have so many more perspectives. I can just speak to my sport. Internationally, there aren't a lot of women sitting at the table making decisions, and some of the decisions that are made negatively impact the women that are currently in the sport. So if we have more women, I believe that part of the solution, this isn't 100% the way, the only solution, but I think part of the solution is to have more voices at the table that are representative of the entire sporting system, more women in all aspects of it, of sport, whether it's coaching, physiotherapy, administration. There's just so many roles that could include women, and it'll just make it a more well-rounded system. But that being said, I mean, as slow as the changes have been within sport, there have been glimmers of hope that we're moving towards the right direction. The first thing that comes to mind was, I believe, last summer, the promotion that came around the women's soccer, I believe it was the World Cup. That was such a sight to see, just walking downtown Toronto and seeing all the billboards that were highlighting this soccer tournament, women's soccer tournament that was going to be playing. And I don't know if it was because of COVID, and unfortunately, men's sports weren't on. And so they're like, okay, well, we got to put something on. But that being said, they could have also left it to the side and said, hey, women's sports, we're not going to even play it, even if there is airtime. So seeing that, there is that slow change of, putting the importance around women in sports and highlighting the importance of it. So we're slowly tracking towards the right direction. But I think, things can quicken, and we can pick up the pace a bit on it, but I'm still happy with how things are going.
To that point, though, Cynthia, when women's sport was put on TV, the numbers speak for themselves. They were putting up record ratings. People watched. It's a matter of giving them that platform. You can't say no one cares about women's sports when it's actually not being given its due coverage. Well, of course, we can't watch. We can't find it anywhere. But once it's up, once you build it, they will come.
They will come.
Yes, that is for sure. Adam, Cynthia, really appreciate the two of you taking the time today. Some great insight, some great valuable personal experience that you shared as well. So we thank you for that. We wish you all the best, and hobefully we run into each other down the road.
Thanks, Andi.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cynthia.
There you go. Cynthia.
Congrats on a great season.
Yeah, she had a fantastic season. Cynthia Appia, bobsledder, started off as a brake person, took over as a pilot, had an incredible world championships. This year finishing top 10 in the 2-woman event. She was 9th, the highest for the Canadians at the world championships. And then monobob, which is going to make its Olympic debut, Beijing 2022. She finished 5th. So she is just going. And Adam Van Couverden, you know him for forever. He's flag bearer for Canada, Olympic champion, world champion in kayak, now member of parliament. I said I was going to tease him, but now I'm going to do it when he's not here to defend himself. But he did share with me when he was still doing media work with us over at CBC Sports, how he's like, I watched the House of Commons on TV. It's good drama. And then look at him, though. Now he's in politics, but hopefully he can do some great things with that platform, and I know he will. I'm very excited to welcome in our two other guests for today on International Women's Day. Both of them have accomplished so much in their field of play, and it would be Christina Alugbo, water polo athlete, who was with the national team for 15 years, still plays pro, I think is getting into coaching, so I want to pick her brain on that. And Chantal Vallée, a championship winning coach in basketball, and also was the first to hold the title of coach and general manager for a men's professional team that was in the Canadian Elite Basketball League, and that was with the Hamilton Honey Badgers. So the two of them, I think, will be clicking on just momentarily. And there we go. Chantal has a really cool background. I like the brick and the books. See, this is what happens now with the whole Zoom, right? I had it with Cynthia. So she, of course, her Wi-Fi went out, which I said, you always have one of those in a Zoom. So that's normal. And then you always have someone whose background you envy.
Well, thanks, Andi. I appreciate and great discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed the entire discussion that you had with Cynthia and Adam, and glad that you had both of them and have Adam representing women in this way in the government. That's terrific.
Yeah, it's so true, because I think, and again, I know we've said this before, that whenever we talk about women in sport, the progression of women in sport, International Women's Day, we as women will support one another. The key to true evolution is when you have men who also come and say, this is important and you need to do this. And Adam's always been that way. So it's great to see that. So we wait. I think Christina will be two-time world medalist, will be joining us in just a moment. But I'll begin with you, Chantal, and just, speaking maybe on that vein, why don't we keep that theme going? When you were approached by the Canadian Elite Basketball League, I mean, these are all men, right? But obviously you come with this extensive resume of 5 national championships, right? With the University of Windsor. But again, right, they were like, no, we want you. What was that conversation like? What was that experience like to even hold that position in a men's league?
And yeah, I think you nailed it on the head, because without the men that were part of that league, I would not have been part of the league. So it was Mr. John Lashway. He was a 22 years executive in the NBA. And he was looking for a Canadian coach, somebody that could take the team, the franchise that he was president of. And it was an email that Mr. Lashway sent me. It was unexpected. I did not apply for the position. And suddenly I get this email, and it was kind of funny because nowhere in the email did he mention it was men's professional. He mentioned professional basketball, coaching a league in the professional rank with world-class players. And so my mind immediately went to, oh, well, I guess Toronto Hamilton is getting a WNBA team. That's what I thought, because it was not even in my understanding that, somebody would approach me to coach a men's team. And that's really incredible, because without Mr. Lashway, for example, this opportunity wouldn't have been given to me. And once we started talking, not once he mentioned to me, oh, Chantal, it's men. He always took it as, I want a good coach to coach my franchise. I'm the president of this organization, and I want to have the best team possible. It was very impressive to me, and that's very much what I think made me want to be part of it. Later on, when I met Mike Morreale, the commissioner, and all the people involved in the league, the amount of respect was unbelievable. And it's not that I didn't expect that, is that I was actually happily surprised It hadn't been anything that I thought I could do or touch or even accomplish in my life. And so it was nothing but an unbelievably positive experience.
And isn't that the point that we want to get to? And you bring up you bring up a point that really hits home for me, because when I was approached even 5 years ago to host a sports radio show, I mean, at that point, I'd been in the industry for a decade, but I was still taken by surprise. What? Like a woman can host a daily, sports radio talk show? Because you don't see it that often. Not that, you didn't think you were accepted, or that, you just didn't know that it was available to you. And I wonder, like, is that where we want to go? Because you are an accomplished basketball coach, but there's still a little bit of that surprise element of, oh, you want me to be part of the men's game? And isn't that what we're working towards, where it no longer becomes a surprise? The resume should just speak for itself, because those avenues should just be known that they're available to women.
Absolutely. I think for me, when I think back about when I was a child or a young woman or teenager growing up, and I look into what I thought I could become, first of all, I didn't even think I could really be a coach, because everything I would see on TV, in the media, in the newspaper, was always men coaching. And I saw one woman coach, and she was the coach of Laval University. Her name was Linda Marquis. When I saw her on a little, it was a tiny 5-second clip on CBC, actually, I thought, oh, a woman can coach. Mind you, it was only coaching women. And not one time in my life have I ever had I'm going to use the word opportunity to dream or think that I could, for example, coach in the NBA. Whereas a lot of my male friends and really good friends would say, oh, I'm going to make it in the NBA. I'm going to play in the NBA. I'm going to coach in the NBA. We all have these dreams when we're a child, and we just hope to go as far as we can. And I remember thinking, oh, I guess I can't dream. In fact, it's not even that I couldn't dream this. I didn't even know that it was possible. So for me, it was like, okay, well, I guess I could coach university. And to this point, again, even when I was, my father was very supportive in having both me and my sister into sport. But I remember wanting to play hockey and wanting to play football, because I would watch the Sunday football with my dad, every Sunday. And the first time I came, I said, Dad, I really would like to play. He says, no, you can't, because you're a woman. And that was so strange for when you're a child and you hear this, you're thinking, oh, I didn't know that I couldn't do this. Why is it that that's only a male sport? To Cynthia's point earlier that she brought, why do we make differentiations? And so there's a very important, a thing to be understood, is that if you can't see on TV or read in the media or listen to women leaders into sports, into leadership role, into administrative role, coaching role, I think that most of the people don't know that these are possibilities for them in terms of career. So the shift that we are seeing is super important. And I think you're right. When we can get to the fact that we're not, oh, another woman, really? I think we will really have reached that equity that we're trying to talk about.
Excellent. Oh, Christina, you have joined us. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Sorry. Hi, Chantal. Hi, Andi. Happy International Women's Day.
Yes, happy International Women's Day. I'm so happy. We're all working out the tech issues behind the scenes, and we got you on, and that's so incredible. And I had talked about you being a 2-time world medalist, joined the national team when you were 19 years old, eventually served as captain. 2020, announced your retirement from the national team, but still play pro. And I was just talking to, Chantal about obviously being a coach and in the CEBL as well, and kind of taking over in the men's side. But I do want to also ask you about coaching, because we feel it's such an important role for women to be in. And if I understand correctly, playing pro, are you also coaching like under 16s or youth levels? Are you still doing that?
Yeah, exactly. I just started actually full-time coaching. I mean, it's a complete different from my athletic career. I used to do clinics or just coach for the summer. Coaching a whole year program for young girls is like thinking from the physical to the mental to every other part of their growing in the sport, right? So, I mean, it was a lot challenging. Like, it's a lot more challenging than I thought, as I'm still playing out here and coaching. So it's like managing also the time of training and then coming. But I mean, it's still keeping my head as an athlete into the game and seeing it from a coaching aspect. And I have always said it growing up. I also had a refereeing level up to regionals. So just seeing it from the ref side, from the coach's side as an athlete, it's always helping you seeing it in a different way and growing as an athlete and growing as a person in general. And I'm really liking it out here. Actually, I coach from under 16 to under 20, the female, and they've pretty much gave me the whole veto because of my experience in sport. And here it's kind of growing water polo out here in Verona. So they've kind of given me like the power to do a lot of things and try a lot of new things, get the equipment that they need and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool that I can try to bring all that experience worldwide that I have to this little city, well, this big city in Verona here.
Oh, I'm so jealous of where you are. But let's start off with, I'll start off with you again, Christina, before I go to you, Chantal. So dealing with the sport of water polo, maybe what are some aspects of water polo that have just had an incredible impact on your life? But then also maybe what are some aspects of water polo that have just frustrated you?
Definitely, I would say, I mean, all the life things that I've passed in my life, like all the family, personal things, I would say. And the fact for water polo, for me, it's a team sport. And I've always been a team sport. I mean, I've played every team sport in high school. I mean, I've played them, doesn't mean I was good at them. But I mean, I just loved being part of a team. And I think for me, the team sport was really my calling, as I do come from a bigger family. And I think that in any place I've been in the world, I mean, even if like I played 5 years in Russia, I mean, I just felt part of a family, even though it could have been hard out there. I mean, even out here, I mean, in Team Canada and my clubs in Canada that I played for, and I was always part of a big group of girls and coaching and like just from A to Z family, people, also the parents supporting and all that. So I think that's the nicest part, because when the time gets hard, I mean, going 3 Olympic cycles, not qualifying. I mean, still having that family there that has fought with you through thick and thin, and still being able to keep pushing forward with them and living those moments with them. I mean, that's what made me keep fighting, Mm-hmm. And I think the hardest thing of my career in water polo is that, I mean, I've wanted it to be a great sport, a known sport. I mean, I love every sport. I played soccer for a long time, basketball. So my brother's a very good basketball player, and hockey, obviously, like with my brothers and stuff. But I mean, water polo was just not a known sport, like as much as those sports out there. And I think that's a little bit frustrating because it doesn't have its merit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, I'm like thinking a little bit in Italian sometimes, but I mean, it's merit that it deserves. Sometimes it's like the toughness that it is. I mean, even rugby, like we talk about it, how it looks a little bit like rugby, but in the water, and it has a little bit of the finesse of basketball, but then it has this, but it doesn't have its own identity. And I think that's where more sometimes it frustrated me that it wasn't more known out there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, water polo. I mean, for Canadians who love rough and tough sports, like water polo should be right up there. I mean, there's a lot of kicking and elbowing and grabbing, but I mean, I love it, but I totally get where you're coming from too, right? Sometimes just that platform to be a little bit more seen. Chantal, what about in the world of basketball? What has it given you? But what are still some of the challenges the sport itself faces that you're trying to also push forward? And maybe even, again, from a woman's perspective, because we know about NBA, WNBA, but maybe the other routes.
Well, I think naming the NBA and WNBA to start up with, I think one of the things that the basketball has given a voice to women. We've seen WNBA players in particular this summer, how active they were with Black Lives Matters and how they were really an agent for change in politics as well. And they really took a stance for that. In Canada, we have women like Kia Nurse in basketball has really helped to increase the media exposure of women. And I think that brings me back to maybe one place that I think is still a bit frustrating is how, let's just be real, there is almost no media coverage on women, except CBC's an amazing job with your executive director, Chris Wilson, who really said we want to do equally, value women and put women on TV as much as men, and they've done that. But apart from that, the most of the other television channels, the written media, I think there's room for challenging the fact that we see research shows about 3 to 6% media coverage on women. I mean, we're talking like this is minimum, and we're in 2021. And so that's a place that I think if we can see more women in the media, I've seen this in Windsor, in my hometown, as a basketball coach at the university. We've been fortunate to be covered in our written radio and TV media equally to the men, sometimes maybe even a little bit more, because we've had some incredible bouts of success, and the response from the community was unbelievably positive. And so unless women are put out there in general on the national level, I think we're really missing out.
Yeah, that is for sure. Well said. Christina and Chantal joining me here. Christina, again, kind of going on, you dipping your toe, obviously now in coaching. Where do you want to see women represented in the sport of water polo, not just in the pool? But do you see that evolution happening in your sport? Would you like to see more of it?
Definitely. I mean, there's never enough of it. I mean, I think it's just more like, even I'd like to have 12 women at the Olympic Games, like the men have. That's just the start point right there. I think FINA has started having more female referees, more female delegates up there. But I mean, it's just one out of for every 12 men out there. So I think it's just getting them more out there and having a voice at the end of the day. I mean, I know we've had a few representatives from Canada being up there in the FINA world and helping us have a name, have a voice. But I mean, we definitely need way more women out there. And the problem is with water polo, it goes way back. It's a European mentality where they're just thinking it's a men's sport. It's a men's sport. So they're slowly getting there. But I mean, I don't, like Chantal said, it's 2021. We just got to speed up a little bit,
Mm-hmm. How do you even foresee a path? Is it a matter of doing what you're doing right now, like getting into coaching? You said you also have the ability to ref. I don't want to be dramatic, but how does that fight happen? How does that fight progress? Because you're right. You're talking about sports that are ingrained decades, into certain old boys club, or they have a certain way of doing things and they're very resistant to change. Where do you even begin to dip your toe?
Well, definitely as coaching small clubs, coaching around the world. I mean, Italy is one of the places that do a lot of the control in water polo. So I did step my toe in the best place possible. But I mean, I think it's stepping out there, it's coaching, and then seeing yourself that you do have a voice. And I hope that a lot of the ex-athletes to come do, after their career, step up and stick around and help out to develop in female in water polo. I mean, there's so many ways for sure. Refereeing is an easier path because as they do become eventually delegates, which we call them in the FINA world and whatnot. So that is the step. You can't just really jump from a head coach or coaching a club to being one of those. I mean, there's always steps to follow, but I think it's starting there. But I think it's also at our federations in Canada, being head of your federation in Canada, having a voice, having a face. I mean, as a player, you've already branded yourself and the people seeing the work that you've done, and then it's growing from there and using that as a potential to help the future of water polo and women.
Mm-hmm. Chantal, what was the reaction when you joined the Honey Badgers? Just from the league, from the players, also being a GM, you had to reach out to agents, right? Like you had to talk to people. Just what was that whole experience like for you and the reaction from male counterparts?
Yep, it was nothing but positive, actually. And I was really shocked about it. I was expecting a little bit of pushback, or, expecting maybe some kind of maybe a lack of credibility because I wasn't known in the men's professional world. But I think when you're a GM and you start making a phone call and you want to give an athlete a job, their agents are right there with you. It doesn't matter whether you're a female or a man. There's a contract, there's a negotiation going on, and for me, it was nothing but actually really, really empowering because of the response I've had from the players and the coaches. And same thing with the players. There's not one player that said, "Well, I'm not sure I want to go play for a female." It was actually the opposite. I actually have two players that told me, "We want to go play for you. We want to try what it feels like to play for women. We're actually excited to be part of making history." And it was not expected, once again. It was one of those, "Oh, wow, okay, that's how you guys think. Fantastic." That was really, really empowering.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. What about starting from, maybe earlier on in your career, or maybe it was just in the middle or near the end? I mean, I don't know. I think mentors can enter your life at any time. But Christina, was there anybody in particular you looked up to, who, you know, encouraged you to also, you know, keep doing what you're doing, be the best, fight hard? Just who was somebody, maybe it was even in the pool, maybe it was somebody who just kind of taught you in life, right? But like, who was a mentor for you?
Like I said at the beginning, my family, like, so every person that has been in my water polo career, but definitely my sister. And I would say in the women's world that right now is still there, Cora Campbell, that is an ex athlete back in the 2000 games and now is an assistant coach of the women's national team. So I mean, definitely those two that have been there, and I could go name them all, and I hope they all know who they are. But I mean, my sister and Cora are definitely still there today, helping me get through these phases of transitioning from athlete to coaching and keep fighting the fight. And they were there also when I first entered. So I mean, I would say those two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not easy. I think any athlete, when they go from, you know, being the athlete to then what comes next, right? When retirement is there. So I think men and women both go through it. But, you know, we know that the options are a lot for men and a little bit few and far between for women. So, I mean, that has to be a big fight for you, which, you know, we admire. And I mean, I know it's got to be on your shoulders, but at the same time, I mean, do you see the steps? Like, do you wake up some days and say, what the heck am I doing? Or do you wake up most days and say, this is awesome?
I wake up some days saying, "Uh-oh, have I got too far?" For sure, because I mean, it's over 27 years that I'm actual water polo athlete. I mean, over 15 to 16 years on the national team. So I mean, it's all I've known. I mean, it's pretty much all I've known is physically, and I'm still doing it, which is still good. But I mean, I think it's just knowing that I have all these other water polo athletes, young females, hands in, like, they're in my hands now, and I got to help them grow and show, like, transpire that who I was or who I am as a person and as an athlete, and help them also eventually get that from the water polo world. I mean, like I said, I will always be thankful for the life I lived as an athlete, but I want to transmit that as a coach now. And it's kind of like finding how and going back to those moments and reliving certain things, that's where I would say is awesome, because then I go back and have that feeling again as when that coach or that one person said that to me, it helped me, or that one reporter asked me that question, and like, you just go back to every single moment, and that's where it gets exciting, because you get to relive it again. And for sure with the girls, I mean, they got my hands full, so it's good. I love it. And I mean, I didn't think I used to say to a lot of people, I'm never going to coach, because I used to see the coaches. I mean, Chantal could probably say it, like, it's a hard job. I mean, it's your life job, and you're taking care of everybody. You're the one in charge. And still till today, I'm playing, and I'm still waiting always on my leader as my coach. Even if you have captains and you have other people around, I mean, your leader is your coach, and it's the voice of the team, right? So it is something to look forward to, and exciting, and we'll see where it leads to.
Well, so how about that then for you, Chantal? I mean, who was your mentor, but also being a coach, and you've been a longstanding coach. Has anyone ever said anything to you about how you've helped them and influenced them? I'm sure you've had many like that.
Yes, actually. Well, first of all, I think, like Kristina said, our parents are so vital in the way that we are raised and the way that we develop resilience. My mom and my dad taught me so much in terms of work ethic, and you know, they were my first role models. The interesting point in my career is that I never had actually a female role model. I've never had a female coach. I've never had a female leader. It's not something that I have experienced at all. And so the people that influenced me, all my mentors were men. They were all wonderful. I've learned a lot from them. And they really helped me to form who I am. But the reverse is now that I'm on the other side and I'm the coach and I'm coaching these women, and they tell me that, you know, they see me as a role model because I'm a woman in particular. It brings a perspective of responsibility on my shoulder that I didn't really expect. It's not because that I'm a role model because I'm a coach, but as a woman, as a strong woman, as a leader in the community, as a person that gets to speak on media, has that platform. My players look up to me in a way that I think I never had the chance to see that. So it's a hard perspective to understand for me, but it certainly brings about how much more important it is to have people like even like you, Andi. That's you know, in broadcasting as a woman, like that's terrific. And I want to say to Kristina, like, the importance of you being a woman in coaching is probably tenfold what you can even imagine because of that gender, because of these young girls that can look up to you and be like, oh, I could be like her, and I could be inspirational. Maybe I could have a career. This is so important that we can, put our faces out there for these younger women, and it's a gift of life. I think that we have the chance to be either in broadcasting or coaching or Christina now in that role. I think that we should really just also be grateful and cherish it as much as trying to encourage the women to go in that field. I guess I'm going to finish by saying on that note in particular that several of my players have told me they're afraid to go in coaching. They think it's too much work, or they think it's too hard, or you're being criticized as a leader, you're being scrutinized. And the answer is yes, all of the above. It is exactly like that. But at the same time, our male counterpart have done it successfully for so many years, and I think that we should not be afraid to go in and make mistakes and learn with trial and errors and forge a way and find a voice and be out there in a way that we can make this somewhat of a normality in our society.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to end off by asking the two of you the same questions I had asked Cynthia and Adam, but on that note, because I want to ask you if there's something you want to change obviously from a female perspective when it comes to inequity in your sport. But you brought up something, Chantal, that also hits home with me, right? Like women and the fear of failure. There's not a fear of failure because, more personally, like, oh, I failed, I didn't get the job done. The fear of failure for women comes from carrying the weight of all the other women, because I hate that there's still blanket judgment with women, right? Like if one woman becomes a coach and doesn't get the job done, so a woman becomes an NBA coach, great, doesn't get the job done. Listen, so many men get fired, right? So if she gets fired, that's it. But there's still this belief that, oh, see, she got fired, that means no woman can be a coach. Oh, that woman didn't succeed at being a coach in water polo, that means no woman can succeed being a coach in water polo. That's what I want to see changed, right? Because when we start treating women the exact same way we treat men, listen, GMs are hired to be fired. Coaches are hired to be fired. That's like that. There's a reason why that saying exists. Men, and then because we look at them individually, so-and-so got fired because he didn't do a good job there, but he'll probably get a job elsewhere. But a woman gets fired, it's, see, no woman can do that job. I hate that. I hate the generalization. I'm challenging that, and I want to see it gone. Now that I got that off my chest, I will now come to you, Christina. When it comes to inequity in your sport, what's something you'd like to challenge? But also when it comes to your sport, what gives you hope for the progression of women?
Well, when it comes to inequity, I think the obvious is the teams out there and the salary. Like we say, there's no pro teams. Why is there no pro women's team that is out there as high as a men's pro team? And that's just in water polo. But I mean, just salary wise, from coaching to players, I mean, they're having a hard time paying women athletes, but they're paying the men's team and they're not even playing. Out here in Italy is just a perfect example of it. But I mean, worldwide, in Canada, we don't even have, and I think for all the sports, I think going back, we're starting with the female hockey league, but why? Why is it low on pro leagues for female out there, and male leagues is everywhere, and it's the biggest thing that people are watching? So I think I would challenge is that trying to get the same level of fairness and games and visibility also for those teams. And then also the amateur sport, of course, I've been fighting for amateur sport my whole life. But I mean, if we have more pro teams, and it's exciting. And I know I heard a little bit of the live streaming with Adam, is just having or Cynthia, I believe that said it, is having the airtime for them, having the airtime, watching them. And then I think it is interesting. I go back to Montreal 2005. There was nothing because hockey season was on a strike. There was nothing. So the people were waiting for something. And then Montreal 2005 FINA World Games were there, and everybody's watching, and it was interesting. And everybody followed the female women's water polo because they didn't have anything else to watch at that time, that it came in and they were cooped up. So I think it's just like we said, having that visibility, but giving them the opportunity to even play and showing their sport. In water polo, we lack a lot of pro or club level. Like a lot of clubs are dropping, so just more of that. And I think just to go back on the question, it was what's good about my sport.
Yeah, like what gives you hope, right, for the future of women in water polo?
I think all this time that right now it is a pandemic and all that, but I think a lot of people have taken in more time to listen and start opening up to being there. And we are noticing, but I think people are acting more upon it. It is being done through media more likely because now everything's locked down or closed. But I mean, at least people are having the time to look and trying to be supportive of these female sports and athletes. So I've seen more out here, especially because I mean it was rough in Italy for a while of the pandemic, but just out here the sponsors, well, at least for Verona, that is, are very supportive, and they're trying to be there for every single athlete of mine or every single female sport. I mean, I think the females that I'm coaching have more pool time than most athletes out there, and the male. So is it right? Is it wrong? I mean, I think for now the people are just being more open-minded and listening because they have the time to do so. So I'll hope that this will keep going and that we start here in Verona and eventually grow big, or people are just going to copy what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, and on the sponsorship side, I'll sound like a broken record on this. We need to also just get rid of, there's belief from sponsors that putting money into men's sport is seen as an investment. Putting money into women's sport is seen as a risk. Stop that. Stop.
Yeah.
I like it. Chantal, I will come to you with the exact same. Something you'd like to see, like you want to challenge in basketball when it comes to inequity, and something that also gives you hope.
Well, Andy, you couldn't have said what I wanted to say with a better voice and passion than I did. So this is excellent. And I wanted to say that when I did take over the gym and coach of the men's professional team, the pressure of feeling that I had to win, not only because I wanted to, not only because I was a professional and I was a coach that wanted to be successful, but because I was a woman, that weighed on my shoulder all summer. And when we made it to the final, I was like, whew, okay, like, thank God. And at least, but after that, I slept for a whole month. It was so difficult, that pressure. And I hadn't realized how it was kind of a program playing inside of me all through the competitive season, how important that was. That being said, I think that for me, I found that probably one of the solutions to help women the most is media. Everything that we grow up to believe, think, act, do, emulate comes from TV, comes from role modeling, comes from people that we see out there. And I think that the role of the media is so critical to change a narrative. If media continue to only show 3 to 6% of women on TV, or write about 3 to 6% of women in sport in the written print or in social media, it's not going to change. And that's just a fact, because it is, let's say say it the way it is a money-making venture, like you just explained, Andy. And I think that if people see the value of women on TV and are willing to then pay for sponsorship because there's going to be viewership, that changes the entire narrative. There might be more sponsors interested, more money input into the women's program, more female being put on TV. And I think that's really where it can change, because the quality of the game, the quality of athletes, the quality of coaches, managers, administrator is right equal with guys. There's no difference. It's entertaining, interesting. And maybe an example, this morning I had a discussion with a good friend of mine. We said, oh, March Madness is happening, And I said, yeah, okay. And so that's just a guy thing, right? There's no March Madness for women. I said, no, there is. Absolutely. March Madness also includes women, but we have never seen it in our country. Right? Canada does not promote March Madness for women. It only shows the man on TV. And so that right there is I think, where we can really address the core of the situation. That being said, the positive side, when I started to be the coach and the GM of the Honey Badger in 2019, I was the only female. The next summer, there was 3 of us coaching in the league. That's amazing. I was so happy for them and so proud that other teams, other coaches, other GM went to hire female to be coaching those guys, and that's amazing. And so we need to keep that door open.
Perfect. Well, the theme of this year's International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. We just laid down a lot of challenges right there. That's for sure. So Christina, Chantal, appreciate you taking the time today. Much success in everything that comes your way. And thank you again to Cynthia and Adam, who joined me earlier. And to everyone here taking the time to listen to our discussion today, really appreciate it. Stay safe out there, and happy International Women's Day, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.